When were you paid to take someone out? My best friend offered me $1,000 to take his mom on a date, and I can't tell him about the night we had. We'd been friends since 3rd grade, and I'd basically grown up at his house, but this was weird even for him. Marvin had moved to San Francisco after college and was making crazy money at some tech startup. He called me panicking because he couldn't get a flight back for his mom's 50th birthday. Mrs. Aki had been like a second mom to me growing up. She'd driven us to soccer practice every week and always made extra dumplings when I came over. But taking her on an actual date felt like crossing some invisible line. "Just take her to dinner and a movie," Marvin said over the phone. "She's been really lonely since the divorce, and I don't want her spending her birthday alone." The money was too good to pass up. I was working at Best Buy and living with my parents, so $1,000 meant I could finally fix my car. I agreed to do it. When I showed up at Mrs. Aki's house that Friday night wearing my only nice shirt, she opened the door expecting Marvin. Her face fell when she saw me standing there with grocery store flowers. "Oh, it's you, Joseph," she said, trying to hide her disappointment. "Marvin said he was sending someone, but I thought maybe." She trailed off and I felt terrible. Here was this woman who'd made me countless after-school snacks now standing in a black dress she'd probably spent hours picking out, realizing her son had pawned her off on his friend. "Happy birthday, Mrs. Aki," I said, handing her the flowers. "Marvin really wanted to be here, but he couldn't get away from work. He asked me to make sure you had a good night." She forced a smile and invited me in while she put the flowers in water. The house looked exactly the same as when we were kids, except all of Mr. Aki's stuff was gone. Even his ugly recliner that used to dominate the living room had vanished. "You look really nice," I said, and I meant it. She'd always been pretty in that mom way, but tonight she looked different. Her hair was down instead of in its usual ponytail, and she was wearing makeup. "Thank you, Joseph. I suppose we should get going." The car ride started out painfully awkward. She sat pressed against the passenger door like she was trying to escape. I tried asking about her job at the hospital, but got one-word answers. By the time we got to the mall, I was sweating through my shirt. Shopping turned things around. I suggested we look for a birthday present from Marvin, and she perked up. We went into Nordstrom, and she started trying on scarves while I held her purse. After the 3rd scarf, she started laughing. "This is ridiculous," she said. "My son is paying you to babysit me." "He's not paying me to babysit you," I lied. "He just wanted to make sure you had fun tonight." She studied my face and must have decided to believe me because she relaxed. We spent an hour in the mall with her trying on increasingly ridiculous hats while I took pictures. She bought a leather jacket that made her look 10 years younger and wore it out of the store. At the movie theater, she picked Baby Girl, some intense erotic drama I'd never heard of. I bought popcorn, and we settled into the back row. 20 minutes into the movie, during a particularly steamy scene, I felt her hand on my thigh. Not in a motherly pat way, but resting there with intent. My whole body went rigid. This was Mrs. Ki, the woman who'd taught me how to use chopsticks. I glanced at her in the flickering light. She was staring straight ahead, but I could see her chest rising and falling quickly. Her hand stayed on my thigh for the rest of the movie, occasionally squeezing during tense moments which made my third leg tense. My brain short-circuited. I spent the last hour of the movie hyper-aware of every place our bodies touched. Dinner was at this fancy Italian place Marvin had made reservations at. Mrs. Ki ordered wine and insisted I try some, even though I was only 20. We talked about everything except the hand-on-thigh situation. She told me about the divorce, how Mr. Ki had left her for his CrossFit instructor. I told her about my dead-end job and community college classes. The whole time, she kept touching my arm when she laughed and playing with her necklace. When I pulled into her driveway at 11, neither of us moved to get out. The porch light cast shadows across her face. She turned to me and suddenly we were kissing. Not a polite peck, but real kissing, with her fingers in my hair and my hands on her waist. She tasted like wine and tiramisu. "Come inside," she whispered against my mouth. What happened next was the best night of my life. I'll spare the details, but Mrs. Ki was nothing like the girls I'd been with. She knew exactly what she wanted, and wasn't shy about taking it out of me. Mrs. Ki was freaky. But I woke up around 3 in the morning to the sound of the front door opening. Mrs. Aki was pressed against my back, her arm draped over me. Footsteps came up the stairs. The bedroom door creaked open. "Mom?" Marvin stood there frozen in the doorway staring at us, while I scrambled for the blanket that had fallen on the floor. My hands grabbed at anything to cover myself, but the sheet was tangled around my legs. Mrs. Ki yanked the comforter up to her chin, and nobody said anything for what felt like forever. Marvin's face changed from confused to understanding to pure rage in about 3 seconds flat. His whole body tensed up, and he slammed his fist into the doorframe so hard that a framed picture crashed down in the hallway. The glass shattered across the hardwood floor, and Mrs. Ki flinched at the sound. I opened my mouth to try explaining, but nothing came out except this weird croaking noise. Marvin's eyes locked on mine with this look that made me want to disappear through the mattress. "Get dressed and meet me downstairs," he said to his mom, without looking at her. Then he pointed at me with his whole hand shaking. "You better be gone in 5 minutes." He turned and stomped down the stairs, each footstep making the whole house shake. Mrs. Ki started crying the second he left, these huge sobs that shook her whole body. She kept saying it wasn't supposed to happen like this over and over while rocking back and forth on the bed. I jumped up and grabbed my jeans from the floor, hopping on one foot trying to get them on. My shirt was inside out, but I didn't care. Mrs. Aki just sat there wrapped in the blanket, looking completely destroyed. Her makeup from last night was smeared down her face, and she looked way older than 50. I shoved my feet into my shoes without tying them, and grabbed my phone and wallet from the nightstand. Downstairs, I could hear Marvin pacing in the living room, his footsteps heavy on the floor. I went to the bedroom window and saw my car parked right behind his rental. There was no way to get to it without walking past him. The back door was my only option. I crept down the hallway trying to avoid the creaky spots I remembered from being a kid. The arguing started before I even made it to the kitchen. Marvin's voice carried through the house, asking his mom how she could do this with his best friend. Her response was too quiet to hear, but it made him yell even louder. I slipped out the back door and ran across the yard to the side gate. My hands shook so bad I couldn't get the latch open at first. The metal kept slipping through my sweaty fingers. Finally it clicked, and I sprinted to my car, ducking low like that would somehow make me invisible. The key wouldn't go in the ignition because my hands were trembling too much. I dropped the keys twice before managing to start the engine. The clock said 3:47 a.m., and the streets were completely empty on the drive home. I pulled into my parents' driveway at 4 and just sat there in the dark. My phone started buzzing with text after text from Marvin. The notification previews showed enough that I knew they were bad. I couldn't bring myself to actually open them yet. My legs felt like jelly when I finally got out of the car. I snuck into the house through the garage and went straight to my room. The bed felt wrong after being in Mrs. Key's king-size one. I stared at the ceiling until the sun came up, replaying everything that happened. My phone kept buzzing on the nightstand, but I left it face down. Around 6, I finally picked it up to check Marvin's messages. They were exactly what I expected, but somehow worse seeing them written out. He called me every name you could think of, and made up some new ones. The messages went from rage to disappointment to disgust as he processed what he'd seen. The last one was the worst, because it was just one line about how he couldn't believe I do this for money. That hit different from all the cursing and name-calling. I didn't sleep at all, and when my alarm went off for work, I called in sick. My voice sounded rough enough that the manager didn't question it. Mom knocked on my door at 8 asking if I wanted breakfast. I mumbled something about food poisoning through the door, and she left me alone. The morning dragged by with me drifting in and out of this weird half-sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Marvin's face in that doorway. Around noon, my phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Key. Her message was all formal and distant, nothing like how she'd been last night. She said we needed to establish clear boundaries and what happened could never happen again. She wrote it like a business email, all proper sentences and no emotion. It hurt more than Marvin's angry messages somehow. I spent the rest of the day in bed going over everything trying to figure out where it went wrong. The $1,000 sat in my wallet on the nightstand and felt like it weighed a ton. Every time I looked at it, I remembered why this whole thing started. The money that seemed so important yesterday now felt dirty. I couldn't even think about using it to fix my car anymore. It would just remind me of the worst night of my life every time I drove. By evening, my parents were getting worried, but I kept insisting I was sick. Dad brought me soup that I didn't touch, and it sat getting cold on my desk. The room felt smaller with each hour that passed. Sunday night, my phone buzzed with a text from Alan Piper, asking if I was really sick or just hungover again. I typed back that I'd messed up bad, but couldn't explain it over text. He sent back 3 question marks, but I didn't answer. Monday morning came too fast, and I dragged myself out of bed at 6:30 for my shift at Best Buy. My uniform shirt still had that new smell from the dry cleaners, but it felt heavy on my shoulders. The drive to work took forever with every red light making me think about turning around. I parked in the back of the lot and sat there for 5 minutes before going in. Alan was already at the customer service desk when I walked through the automatic doors. He took one look at my face and his eyebrows went up. I clocked in without saying anything and went straight to the TV section to avoid him. The morning crawled by with me helping customers on autopilot while Alan kept shooting me looks from across the store. At noon, he cornered me in the break room and said we were getting lunch whether I wanted to or not. We went to the Subway next door and sat in the back booth away from everyone. Alan unwrapped his sandwich and waited while I stared at mine. I started from the beginning with Marvin's phone call about his mom's birthday. Alan listened without interrupting while I told him about the $1,000 and taking Mrs. Key to dinner. When I got to the part about her hand on my thigh at the movies, his eyes got wide. I kept going through the kiss in the driveway and what happened after. My voice cracked when I described Marvin standing in the bedroom doorway. Alan let out a low whistle and said I'd really stepped in at this time. He wasn't judging me too hard, though, which made it easier to finish the story. He asked what I was going to do about the money and suggested I should give it back, to show I was sorry. The problem was I'd already used 300 of it to fix my radiator and get new brake pads. The other 700 sat in my sock drawer like evidence of what I'd done. We went back to work, and I tried to focus on restocking shelves, but my mind kept drifting. Tuesday morning, I woke up to my phone blowing up with notifications. Marvin had posted on Facebook about how you never really know someone, even after 17 years. He didn't use my name, but everyone from high school was commenting, asking what happened. Some people were guessing it was about a business deal gone bad. Others thought maybe someone had stolen from him. I watched the comments pile up all morning without responding to any of the messages people sent me. My community college class was that evening, but I couldn't face sitting through 2 hours of accounting. Instead, I got in my car and drove around town with no destination in mind. I found myself on Mrs. Key's street without planning it. I drove past her house slowly and saw her car in the driveway. The living room lights were on, even though it was only 6 o'clock. I circled the block and drove past again. On the 3rd pass, I saw her shadow move past the window, and my chest got tight. I drove home and spent the rest of the night in my room. Wednesday afternoon, my phone rang with Mrs. Key's number on the screen. I let it go to voicemail and listened to it 5 minutes later. Her voice was all business, saying Marvin had gone back to San Francisco and she needed to return some things I'd left at her house. She said to text her when I could pick them up, and that was it. No emotion in her voice at all. I texted back that I could meet her Thursday after work. She responded with just the Starbucks address and a time. Thursday at 5:30, I pulled into the Starbucks parking lot and saw her car already there. She had her window down and waved me over when she saw me. I parked next to her and walked to her driver's side window. She handed me my phone charger without looking at me directly. Her hands were shaking a little, and I noticed she wasn't wearing makeup. I started to say something, but she was already putting her car in reverse. She drove off before I could even thank her for returning my stuff. The charger felt stupid in my hand, like some kind of symbol of everything that went wrong. Friday at work, I was helping a customer pick out a laptop when I completely zoned out. The guy was asking about RAM and processors, but I was thinking about Mrs. Key driving away. I picked up the display model to show him something, and it slipped right through my fingers. Alan caught it before it hit the ground and smoothly took over with the customer. After the guy left with his purchase, Alan pulled me aside and said I needed to get my head straight. He told me I was going to lose my job on top of everything else if I kept spacing out like that. I knew he was right, but I couldn't shake the fog in my brain. That night I was lying in bed scrolling through Instagram when a message request popped up. It was from Marvin's cousin Derek calling me a snake with a bunch of angry emojis. He said everyone was going to know what kind of person I really was. I didn't respond, but I could see he'd been telling people something was up. 3 more people from our friend group had unfollowed me since yesterday. Word was spreading that something had gone down between me and Marvin, even though nobody knew the real details yet. Saturday morning, I sat in my car for 20 minutes before I finally started typing out a text to Marvin. I wrote about how sorry I was and deleted it 5 times before settling on telling him everything, including the weird feelings I'd had for his mom that I never understood until now. My thumb hovered over the send button while my stomach churned, but I hit it anyway, and watched the message turn from delivered to read almost instantly. The 3 dots appeared and disappeared 4 times over the next 10 minutes, but no response ever came through. I threw my phone on the passenger seat and drove to work, trying not to think about what Marvin was doing right now in San Francisco, reading my pathetic attempt at an apology. Friday's double shift started at noon, and Alyssa was already behind the register when I walked in, looking like I hadn't slept in days, which was basically true. She took one look at me and asked what was wrong, and I mumbled something about family problems while avoiding eye contact. Throughout the shift, she kept shooting me concerned looks between customers, and twice she covered for me when I completely spaced out during a sale. The store was busy enough that I could lose myself in helping people find cables and explaining warranty plans, but every quiet moment brought everything crashing back. Around 7 that evening, my phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Key, asking if we could meet to talk properly about everything that happened. My first instinct was to delete it and block her number, but something in the way she'd written it sounded different from her earlier messages. Against every bit of common sense I had left, I texted back that I could meet her at the park near the library the next day. She sent back just the time and nothing else. Saturday afternoon, I got to the park 15 minutes early and sat on a bench watching kids play on the swings while their parents scrolled through their phones. Mrs. Key showed up right on time wearing jeans and an old sweatshirt instead of her usual put-together outfits. She looked tired in a way that made her seem older than 50, and when she sat down next to me, she left plenty of space between us. She started talking without looking at me, saying Marvin wouldn't answer her calls, and she didn't know how to fix the mess we'd created together. Her voice cracked when she mentioned his name, and I noticed her hands were shaking slightly as she picked at a loose thread on her jeans. She said she'd been lonely and vulnerable after the divorce, and knew that wasn't an excuse for what happened between us, but wanted me to understand she never meant for things to go that far. We both agreed it was a mistake while sitting there on that bench, but when she finally looked at me, I could see in her eyes that she didn't completely mean it, and neither did I if I was being honest. The whole conversation felt like we were reading from a script we thought we were supposed to follow, rather than saying what we actually felt. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the envelope with $700 I'd withdrawn from my savings account that morning. I tried to hand it to her, saying she could give it back to Marvin as a start on paying him back, but she pushed my hand away, shaking her head. She said money wasn't going to fix what we'd broken, and giving it back would just make Marvin angrier, because it would seem like we were trying to buy our way out of the consequences. We sat there for another few minutes, not talking, before she stood up and walked away without saying goodbye. Sunday morning, I woke up with a new determination to at least try to make things right with Marvin, even if it was hopeless. I wrote him another message saying I would pay back every single penny of the $1,000 and never contact him or his mom again if that's what he wanted to happen. I told him I knew our friendship was over, but I wanted him to know how sorry I was, and that I would do whatever it took to give him some kind of closure. This time he responded within minutes with just one word that felt like a punch to the gut. Don't. Monday marked the start of week 2 since everything fell apart, and I threw myself into work like my life depended on it, which in a way it did. I volunteered for every extra shift available, and stayed late doing inventory just to avoid going home and thinking about everything. The manager noticed my sudden enthusiasm, and made a comment about how nice it was to see me taking initiative, but didn't push when I just nodded and kept working. Tuesday, during my lunch break, Alyssa cornered me in the break room with a knowing look on her face. She mentioned she'd seen me at the park on Saturday with an older woman and asked if I was dating someone's mom as a joke, but the way she said it made it clear she suspected something was up. I forced a laugh and said it was just a family friend going through some stuff, but she gave me this look that said she wasn't buying it at all. That night I was scheduled to close the store, which meant being there until 10 counting registers and making sure everything was locked up properly. Around 9:30, when the store was basically empty except for me and one other employee in the back, Mrs. Key walked through the front doors carrying a laptop bag. She came straight to me saying she needed help with her computer that wasn't working right, but we both knew it was just an excuse to see me again. My hands started sweating as she set the laptop on the counter and opened it to show me some error message that probably wasn't even real. I looked at the screen for a second, then closed the laptop and pushed it back across the counter, telling her this wasn't about her computer and she needed to go home. Her face crumpled and tears started rolling down her cheeks as she stood there in the middle of the store with customers walking past us. I grabbed some tissues from behind the register and tried to hand them to her, but she just stood there crying harder while people started staring at us. The other employee came out from the back to see what was happening, and I had to wave him away while trying to get Mrs. Key to calm down. She kept saying she was sorry over and over while mascara ran down her face, and I finally had to walk around the counter and guide her toward the door. We passed through the TV section where a family was looking at flat screens, and they all turned to watch us go by with this crying woman holding onto my arm. I walked her all the way to her car in the parking lot and helped her get in while she kept apologizing and saying she didn't know what was wrong with her. After she finally drove away, I went back inside, and Alyssa was standing right by the door with her arms crossed. She pulled me into the break room and shut the door behind us, saying she knew something weird was going on between me and that woman. I told her it was none of her business and tried to leave, but she blocked the door saying she'd seen us at the park, and now this crying scene, and if I didn't tell her what was happening, she'd ask the manager about it. I had to sit there and listen to her theories about me having an affair with someone's wife, while I kept telling her she had it all wrong. She finally let me go, but said she'd be watching me, and I knew she meant it. The rest of my shift was torture with Alyssa, giving me looks every time I passed her, and me jumping every time my phone buzzed, thinking it might be Mrs. Key or Marvin. Wednesday afternoon, I was eating lunch in my car when my phone started ringing with a FaceTime call from Marvin for the first time since that night. My hands shook as I answered, and his face filled the screen, looking tired with bags under his eyes and stubble on his face. He stared at me for a long moment, then asked straight out if I had feelings for his mom. The question hit me like a punch, and I sat there in my car not knowing what to say while he waited for an answer. I finally told him the truth, that I didn't know what I felt, but I knew I'd messed everything up and ruined our friendship. His face went hard, and he hung up without another word, leaving me staring at my phone screen. Thursday after work, Alan caught me in the parking lot and said we needed to grab beers because I looked like I was about to explode. We went to this dive bar near the mall and sat in a corner booth while I nursed a beer, and he tried to get me to talk. After his third beer, he leaned across the table and told me I needed to make a real plan to fix this mess before it got even worse. He said I was walking around like a zombie, and everyone at work had noticed something was wrong with me. He suggested I should go see one of the counselors at the community college to help sort through everything that had happened. It felt like admitting defeat, but sitting there in that crappy bar, I knew he was right, because I couldn't keep going like this. Friday afternoon, while I was stocking shelves, my phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Key saying Marvin was flying home for the weekend to talk to her about everything. She warned me to stay away from her house and anywhere else he might go, because she didn't know what he might do if he saw me. The thought of Marvin being back in town made my stomach turn, and I spent the rest of my shift paranoid that he might show up at the store. Saturday, I called in sick to work, and spent the whole day hiding in my room playing video games and trying not to think about what Marvin and his mom might be talking about. My parents kept knocking on my door, asking if I wanted lunch or dinner, but I told them I wasn't feeling good, and they left me alone. Sunday was worse because I knew Marvin was still in town, and every car that drove past our house made me nervous. I stayed in bed most of the day scrolling through my phone and deleting old photos of me and Marvin from over the years. Around 8 that night, I got a text from him saying he was at my house, and we needed to talk right now. My whole body went cold as I heard the doorbell ring downstairs, and my mom calling up that someone was here to see me. I pulled on a hoodie and went downstairs where Marvin was standing in our doorway, looking angry and tired at the same time. He jerked his head toward the driveway, and I followed him out to his rental car where we both got in and sat in silence for a minute. He gripped the steering wheel and stared straight ahead, before telling me his mom had confessed everything about that night and more. She'd told him she had feelings for me that went beyond just that one night, and had for a while, which made everything even worse. He said he couldn't look at either of us the same way anymore, and didn't know if he ever could again. He turned to look at me for the first time since we'd gotten in the car, and his eyes were empty like I was already gone from his life. "We're done, Joseph. 17 years down the drain because you couldn't keep it in your pants." He told me he'd already called his mom, and said he wasn't coming home for Thanksgiving or Christmas, and maybe not ever again because he couldn't stand being in that house knowing what happened there. The money didn't matter anymore because the damage was already done, and no amount of cash could fix what I'd broken between us. I started to say something, but he held up his hand and got out of the car, walking to his rental, without looking back, while I sat there watching my oldest friend disappear from my life. After his taillights vanished down the street, I somehow made it back to my room where everything finally hit me at once. I collapsed on my bed and started crying harder than I had since my grandma died in middle school, these big, ugly sobs that made my whole body shake. 17 years of friendship destroyed over one stupid night, and $1,000 that wasn't even worth it anymore. I must have cried for an hour before I finally ran out of tears and just lay there staring at the ceiling, feeling completely empty inside. Sunday night turned into Monday morning, and I forced myself to get up and go to the community college between my morning and evening shifts at work. The counseling office was in this old building that smelled like coffee and copy paper, and the receptionist looked at me like she could tell I was falling apart. I asked about seeing someone, and she pulled up the schedule on her computer, telling me Usha Dalton had an opening on Thursday at 2 if I could make that work. I wrote my name down on the appointment card she gave me and stuck it in my wallet next to the remaining $700 that felt like blood money now. Work became the only place where I could stop thinking about everything for a few hours at a time. I threw myself into helping customers and organizing inventory and doing anything that kept my hands busy and my mind occupied. But Alyssa kept watching me from the register with this suspicious look on her face like she knew something was seriously wrong with me. She'd ask these pointed questions about how my weekend was, or if everything was okay at home, and I'd have to make up lies on the spot. Alan noticed too and started running interference whenever he could, steering Alyssa away when she got too nosy or covering for me when I zoned out during a sale. Tuesday dragged by, and then Wednesday morning, I was restocking phone cases when my phone buzzed with a voicemail notification from Mrs. Key. I went to the bathroom and locked myself in a stall to listen to it, my hands shaking as I pressed play. Her voice sounded different through the phone speaker, more determined and less broken than the last time we'd talked. She said she'd made an appointment with a therapist for herself and thought I should do the same because we both needed help dealing with what happened between us. She said Marvin was refusing to talk to her too, and she was trying to respect his boundaries, even though it was killing her not to fix things with her son. The message ended with her saying she hoped I was taking care of myself, and then the automated voice asked if I wanted to save or delete it. Thursday came, and I told my manager I had a doctor's appointment so I could leave for the counseling session. The drive to campus felt longer than usual, and I sat in the parking lot for 10 minutes working up the courage to go inside. Usha's office was small with plants everywhere, and one of those white noise machines that made ocean sounds. She was younger than I expected, with purple streaks in her black hair and tattoos peeking out from under her cardigan sleeves. She didn't judge when I told her the whole story from the beginning, just nodded and asked questions that made me think about why I'd made the choices I did. She asked if I'd been attracted to Mrs. Key before that night, and I had to admit that maybe I had noticed her in ways I shouldn't have over the years. She asked why I took the money, knowing it would complicate things, and I told her about my car and feeling stuck living at home with no money for anything. She made me confront the fact that I'd betrayed Marvin's trust in the worst possible way and that some things couldn't be fixed with apologies or money. But she also helped me see that beating myself up forever wouldn't help anyone, and I needed to focus on moving forward and making better choices from now on. We spent the last 15 minutes writing out a real plan on paper, which felt stupid at first, but actually helped to see it all laid out. Pay Marvin back in $200 monthly installments, even if he didn't want the money. Respect boundaries with Mrs. Key, which meant no contact unless absolutely necessary. Focus on the school and work to build a better future for myself, and keep coming to counseling every week to work through my issues. It was simple, but having it written down in my own handwriting made it feel more real and manageable than the chaos in my head. Friday after work, I went to the post office and bought a money order for $200, writing Marvin's San Francisco address on the envelope, with a short note that just said I'd be sending this amount every month until the full 1,000 was paid back. I didn't ask for forgiveness, or try to explain myself again because I knew he didn't want to hear it right now, or maybe ever. The weekend passed quietly, with me actually making it to all my community college classes for the first time in weeks. I took notes and participated in discussions, and my economics professor even commented that it was good to see me engaged again. Small victories started to matter more when you'd lost all the big things in your life. I did my homework at the kitchen table instead of locked in my room, and my parents seemed relieved that I was acting more normal, even if they didn't know what had been wrong. Week 4 started, and Monday afternoon my phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Key that made my chest tight. She joined a support group for divorced women at the community center and was doing better, making friends who understood what she was going through with the divorce and everything else. She said we both needed to move on from what happened and wished me well in finding my own path forward. The text ended with her saying this would be the last time she contacted me and asking me to respect that boundary going forward. I deleted her text and went to the kitchen where I wrote out a check for $200 to mail to Marvin with a letter that took me 3 hours to write. The letter wasn't asking for forgiveness or trying to explain anything away, just me owning up to betraying someone who'd been my brother since we were 8 years old. I walked to the post office that same afternoon and sent it certified mail, so I'd know when he got it. Alan saw me dragging the next morning at work and pulled me aside during our break to ask what was going on. When I told him about the payment plan and Mrs. Key cutting contact, he actually looked relieved and said he'd talk to the manager about getting me more hours on the schedule. Over the next week, Alan came through big time, getting me on the closing crew 4 nights instead of 2, which meant an extra $300 per paycheck. I started putting every extra penny into a savings account for the first time in my life, instead of blowing it on video games or fast food. My car was fixed, but now I had a real goal that mattered more than just getting around town. Friday of week 5, my phone buzzed while I was stocking TVs, and I saw Marvin's name on the screen for the first time since our driveway talk. His text was short, just saying he got the second payment, and while it didn't change what I did, he appreciated that I was trying to make it right somehow. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something, and I screenshot it to look at whenever I felt like giving up on fixing this mess. That weekend, Mrs. Key sent one more text before blocking my number like she'd warned she would. She said she hoped I'd learn from this whole situation and become someone who thought about consequences before acting on impulses. The message stung because she was right about everything, but at least she didn't sound angry anymore, just disappointed and ready to move on with her life. Monday, I had my weekly appointment with Usha, and we spent the whole hour digging into why I made such bad choices when I knew they'd hurt people. She had me write down patterns from my past, like lying to my parents about grades or taking money from my mom's purse in high school. The work was hard and made me feel like crap about myself, but Usha said that was normal and meant I was actually dealing with my issues instead of hiding from them. Week after week, I showed up to her tiny office on campus and slowly started understanding how I'd been selfish and impulsive my whole life without really seeing it. By the second month, I'd sent 3 payments to Marvin and was actually ahead of schedule thanks to all the extra shifts at work. He sent another text after the 3rd payment saying maybe we could meet for coffee after I paid everything back. Not to be friends again, but to get some kind of closure on 17 years of friendship. I wanted to text back a long response, but just sent okay, because I knew pushing would only make things worse. The semester was almost over, and for the first time since starting community college, I was actually going to pass all my classes. I turned in every assignment, showed up for every test, and even participated in study groups, which I'd never done before. My economics professor pulled me aside after the final to say she was proud of how I'd turned things around after a rough start to the semester. My parents noticed the change too, commenting at dinner how I seemed more focused and serious about school and work lately. Mom even said she was proud of me for getting promoted to shift supervisor at Best Buy, which happened after 2 months of perfect attendance and taking every shift they offered. 3 months had passed since that night at Mrs. Key's house, and everything in my life looked different now. I was down to the last 2 payments to Marvin, seeing Usha once a month instead of weekly since I was doing better and actually had money in savings for the first time ever. Mrs. Key had kept her word about blocking me, and we hadn't had any contact since that final text, which for the best, even though I still thought about her sometimes. The coffee meeting with Marvin was set for next month after my final payment, and while I knew we'd never go back to being best friends who hung out every weekend, maybe we could at least end things without all the hate between us. Thanks for hanging out and wondering through all of this with me. It's really been a journey worth sharing together. I'll catch you in the next one. Like the video, it helps more than you think.